Hi, in this tutorial I'm going to demonstrate how to create tables for web pages. So here's an example of the table that we're going to create, and we're also going to work with formatting it using cascading style sheets. Now first of all, before you start creating a table, it's a good idea to plan it out ahead of time and think about the content and how you plan to organize the information. When you're first starting to learn to code a table by hand, it becomes useful because you start to build your table row by row. So knowing what information should be kept together on a row at a time will be useful. Now tables are good for displaying tabular types of information. In the olden days of the web, we did use tables for page layout, but that has been since abandoned, and now the preference is to do page layout with cascading style sheets. So we reserve tables for displaying tabular data. And sometimes a table may not even be the best option for you. With today's smaller handheld devices of smartphones and tablets, as the pages get smaller, tables can become more difficult to see on small screens and to display the content properly. Here's an example. I have a page of some of Elvis's early songs. But as you can see, this table contains a lot of information, and as the window would get smaller and smaller, this information is going to get squished together more and more. So if I squish this and squish it, trying to put this down onto a smaller mobile device can be really tricky for the user to try to read that. So you might consider alternative methods, and actually it's a preference today to start moving away from tabular information to other styles that will fit and display more readily on mobile devices. So here's an example of taking some of this same information and putting it into a list style where the user can go through and find the year information, and then all of the data for particular songs and their release dates are listed in here. So this seems to be a bit easier to read and scale down maybe than a complicated table like this. So keep that in mind when you're designing, that it's not always going to be on a nice big computer screen, and that you want to make accommodations for different size screens. Now I do have other videos on media queries where you could learn to take this table and put it into a division and hide it if the screen gets smaller than a certain dimension. And then in that case, you could have this as another division and have this display in its place. Seems like a lot of extra work, but it all depends on what you want your outcome to look like on different screen sizes. So in any case, when you're going to design your table, you need to consider what the layout of the information is going to be, and what the structure is, and what type of screens this will eventually be displayed on. So back to the example that we're going to build, we're going to have a basic table, and as I said, we're going to use CSS in order to format the layout of this table. So to begin with, I have a sample document set up in my editor, which I'm going to open. So I'm going to pause this and rearrange my screen. So I have my starter file open in my editor, and this is a preview of it. So this is the page without the table, and I have the sample in my web browser open so that we can keep an eye on what our table is going to look like, and you can see how it will start to develop into this finished product. So I'm going to go into the code for my sample, and I already have a style sheet set up with some basic formatting in here, but none of it has been applied to anything in the table yet. So I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom. since our table will be coming in after this bulleted list, I'm going to start it here. Now to begin our table, we start with a table tag. So I'm going to put in the opening table tag, and right away I'm going to come in and put in my closing table tag. So then everything in the table will be contained inside the opening and closing table tags. Now, as I said before, we start to build our table one row at a time. And I'm going to start building with the number and course and credits line. We'll come back and do the title after we have everything else set up. So first of all, this first row, when we're going to create a row, we use TR tags. So a TR tag specifies it's a row. And I like to put in my closing TR tag right away. Then within each row, we define each cell of our table by using TD tags. Now, these are TD for table data. There's another tag that's called the TH tag for table header. And the table header tag are usually reserved for things that go at the top of a column, or maybe you have a row identifier here that is important. So for table headers, we use the TH tag to say table header, and then I'm going to put in the text for that cell and put in a closing TH tag. So as I said, we build a row at a time. So then the next cell is going to be course, and again I'm going to do a TH tag. And then the final cell in my first row is credits. So I'm going to save this, and now I'm going to pop into the preview so that you can see how this is starting to look. Right, not very exciting at this point, but if I select it, you can see the spacing in the table. So let's go back into the code and let's put in a little bit of formatting to start out with so that we can kind of track and see the actual table cells and rows in our table. So I'm going to move up into my style sheet, and we use the CSS styles for formatting your table. So just like we can use other HTML tags in our style rules, we can use the table tag to define a style rule. So let's say border, and we'll say solid, black, and thin. Now if I go into my preview, you can see that this has one box or a solid thin border around the entire table. Now if I want to define for the TH tags, I can say TH, and I'm just going to copy and paste the same thing in because I want to be able to see the actual border. But in this time, instead of black, let's make it red so that we can just discern which is the table header and which is the actual table. Right? So now the black line going around the outside is around the outside of the table, and then the red border in here is defining our table header cells. When we use the TH tag, it automatically bolds the text that's in there, and if this was wider, you'd be able to see that it also centers it within the cell. So as we add some more information in here, you'll start to see how that works. So for now, we'll leave that here, and I'm going to come back down. Now I'm going to add the second row, and the second row is for the course information. So I'm going to add a row in here, and instead of table header tags, I'm going to use TD tags. So I'm going to start my row, and let me close my row, and this time we'll use TD tags. Again, that's short for table data. My first column is the course name or course number. The second cell in here is the course title, and the third cell is the number of credit hours, and so that's just a basic number. So now I'm going to save that, test it in my preview. Okay, and now you can see how this is really visible here, how this TH tag for this cell is being centered between left and right. Now we have the red borders going around here for our TH tags, and we don't have any for our TD tag. So what we have to do is come in and define a rule for TD, and really it's pretty much the same, only let's make this blue. And again, we're doing this not because of we like the color combination, but just so that we can distinguish. Now the TH tags have a red border, the TD tags have a blue border, and the table itself has a black border. So now to complete the rest of the information for this table, we would really develop more rows that are just like this one, and the only difference is the course number and name will change. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause this and I'm going to update these other rows. Okay, so I have gone in and added the other rows for the table, and I'll pop over into the preview and we can look to see what this is starting to look like now. So we have all of our rows in here. Now the last row for total credits only has 2 cells. And if you can see the way it's laid out over here in the final version, we have total credits and then an empty cell or nothing here and then 21. So let me show you what this code looks like and pay attention to what the result is here. We have a TD tag and another TD tag, and then there isn't any other TD tag, so there's a missing block here. So let's go into the code, and here is what's giving us that result. So all the other rows have 3 sets of TD tags, and we only have 2. So what happens if I put in a TD tag here and just a closing TD tag? All right, so we'd have total credits in the first column, nothing in the center column, and then 21 in the third column. So if I go to the preview, you can see that yes, that's starting to look much better. Now, what about the title? We have the title over here. As I said, there are a couple of different ways that we can format that. So I'm going to move to the top of my table, and one way to do that is to create a row. So if I make a row and then I put in, let's make it a TH tag since it's kind of a header at the top, and I'll put in the title here. Let's just see what that looks like. Okay, so now we have one cell here, and this is making it stretch out because of the length of the text. And we don't really need that much space for everything else in here. So as you saw in the example with the Elvis site that I showed previously, where we can have things that will span multiple rows, we can also have things span columns. So let's try spanning the columns in here. So to demonstrate that, right, in the TH tag, and this will also work in a TD tag as well. Let's say col span equals, and now we say how many columns do we want it to span. So if I say 2 columns, and we look at the preview, you can see that now it's spanning across these 2 columns. And if I want it to span over to the third one, then I just change that to a 3. And so now it's spanning over 3 columns. The other option is to use a caption. Now the caption element is used with the data table to describe its contents. So instead of a row, I'm going to get rid of the row tag here and the TH tag, and we're going to put a caption tag around this. And then if I go to preview, then we can see that it looks pretty much the same, only we don't have, it's not within a cell, so we don't have the box going around it. Now as far as formatting this to make it look a little nicer and adjust the size of it and some of the layout elements. We do that through style sheets. So now let's look at styling our table. I'm going to move back into my code, and we started to set some things up here by using the table and the TH and the TD tag. So we can continue building with those. So let's say we wanted to, since we were just working with the caption, let's style the caption. Let's make it a little bigger, 1.2 Ms. We'll make it bold. So let's just see what that looks like in our preview. Yes, it's looking very nice. Okay, let's see if we can adjust the width of the table, and let's try centering it. If you see on the sample here, this is centered between the left and right edge of this division. So I'm going to move into the table, and I'm going to revise the border settings a little bit. Let's just say border, give you an example of border collapse, and we'll say collapse. So without making any other changes, let's show you what the border collapse does. Right, you can see that before there were little spaces around in there, little gutters, and now when we collapse it, it removes those. And I'm going to take out the colors completely in a second. So first we said we were going to change the width of the table. So we can do that by saying width, and we could specify an exact number of pixels, or we can do in percentages, or we can use Ms. So I'm going to say 70% so that it will scale based on the width of the screen rather than being an exact number. And to center the table itself, we say margin, and we set that to auto. So now if I preview, okay, you can see that it's adjusted the width of the table, and now it is being centered in between the edges of our division. Okay, next let's format the table header. So this row going across where we have number, course, and credits. So in here right now we have a color in here for our border, and I'm going to set up the header so that it has some padding, 0 at the top, 5M, 0 bottom, and 0.5M. Let's look at that. Now if we wanted a shaded background in here, we just need to add a background color. So we'll say background color, and I'll put in a hex number, and we'll see if that fills in our color. Yes. And then we'll put the border in for the top and the bottom. So we'll say border top. We'll do a small 1 pixel border, solid, and I'm going to repeat the same thing for the bottom border, and then just change this to bottom. And it's coming along nicely. All right, we'll come back in. Now for the TD tags, right, the other cells that are in these other rows, we'll work on formatting those. So for just the general TD, we're going to do a border bottom, and we'll do 1 pixel, again a thin little border, and we'll do some gray, light gray. We'll also add some padding. It's actually the same padding as up here, so I'm just going to copy that, paste that in, and let's see what this is starting to come along like. We have the padding, but the border didn't show up. That's because I have too many colons in here. One little typo in your style sheet can cause it to not work, so let's see if that fixes it. Yes, that looks much better. Next, I'd like to center the credits, the number of credits in this column. So in our style sheet, I already had a style in here called, or a class called .center, which uses text-align center. So in order to center the content of what's in those cells, I'm going to add this class to each of those cells. So each TD tag where we want to center the contents, I'm going to put a class equals center. And then I'm just going to copy that and paste that into each of these other TD tags that have the number of credit hours that I want to center. Preview that, and our centering is working. Now for formatting the total credits row, This is kind of getting squished in, and total credits does have enough room to sort of extend out over here. So I think what I'm going to do is go into this, and I'm going to have this span these two cells. So I'm going to tell it to span 2 columns. So just like we did when we were doing the title up there, we'll do col span and we'll say 2. Now look what's happening. We've got this, and then this is kind of all shooting over in here. And that is as a result of, we're telling it to span 2 columns. So that's 2. This one is 3, and this one is 4. So that is, the browser's trying to do its best to display whatever it thinks we're trying to make it do. So it's putting in 4 columns. So what I'll need to do is get rid of this extra TD tag in here. And that should fix that. Much better. Okay, now how can we format, say we wanted to format an entire row a certain way. So what we can do is create a class. So let's create a class for the total row, and we'll make the font weight bold, and let's give it a background color, and we'll do that light gray. Now if I go back to my preview, you'll see that this didn't pick up any of that formatting, and that's because we didn't specify for any particular part of our table to use that total class. So since I want that class to be applied to this entire row, I'm going to come down into the row tag, the TR tag, and say class equals total. And now when I preview it, it should pick up that formatting in here. So that is a basic overview of creating tables in HTML5, and also some basic formatting in CSS to format your tables.